All right.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Proof Beyond Reasons. This is Geology coming back at you guys.
It's Mike the Baptist.
J-Mo.
Yo,
Yes,
we have a table now. Like 2 episodes ago, we didn't have a table.
Going
Now
back, trying to figure it out, man. You know, this is what we do. It's all about testing. It's all about trial and error. And so figuring out, see what we have going on. But I like this setup a lot better because it's more of a conversation.
I think my arms like this better.
So today we're going to talk about music. Music, what influences music? How does music influence the culture? What's in the music we're listening to today? And even more so, how is music conveyed as worship? And I think that gets overlooked many times. We don't realize how much music is used as an instrument of worship. And in Scripture, it gives us that insight into how music should be used as worship. So before
I have a question for you.
Sure.
You having a small child, what was the first time that you kind of noticed that your daughter kind of gravitate towards music?
Months.
Right?
I would say in the first few months, you play a little music. So music acted almost as a therapy. When she was crying or she was having a colicky night, couldn't sleep, you play music, a certain tone of music for her to come down, to relax, to get her entertained, to be able to, even now that she's older, to get her to kind of cooperate even in some sense. So we're driving and she's like having one of those moments where her emotions are just everywhere. She didn't get what she wanted, and you throw on some music, a soundtrack that she's familiar with, and she'll just sing on the car ride home. And then that'll kind of sustain and just kind of mellow her out.
Wow.
And so music has an influence.
From the beginning.
And even in some areas, they'll talk about playing music when they're in the womb to get them to get used to either the sounds or to get them to relax or to get them to cooperate or be active or whatever it is. So music plays an interesting role in that as well. Yeah, absolutely. Overall, music is good for all those things. And there has been a lot of research, and I mean, you can check it out on your own. Anyone who's listening or anyone here at this table, there has been research on music in different areas, from Oxford University, Harvard, Stanford, Penn State, University of California, you name it. There's a ton of universities that have done extensive research on music, and much of the research shows that music can be used in a very comforting, in a very therapeutic way for medical purposes, but it also has a spiritual aspect to it, which we can get into in a little bit. But if you're hearing us for the first time, thank you so much for listening to us. Hopefully you're checking us out on one of our platforms, whether that's iTunes,
SoundCloud, Facebook,
YouTube,
Instagram.
Instagram. Check us out on Instagram. And so hopefully you're listening to us. You will spread the word about what we're doing on this podcast, and hopefully more listeners will tune in. So for music, it says here from the research, and I don't have a specific site, but just kind of putting all the different research together. Patients, it can help patients recover faster after surgery because it increases oxygen to the brain and blood flow to the brain. So it allows the body to respond better to treatment because the brain is stimulated. It also influences the sense of hearing, which is linked to emotions and memories. So in some cases, for me, growing up, my dad used to listen to that trio music, the guitar.
Yeah.
He used to listen to that growing up, and I remember that. And I have, man, the last time I actually saw my father, I was 7 years old. And I still have the memories of that. And every time I play the music, immediately I think about him. And immediately I think about a certain birthday party that I was at, and everyone in the house was playing. The music was playing, and everyone was singing the music, and they were dancing to the music and stuff. And even though my memories of my father weren't, like, tremendous, that always brings a smile to my face. And when I play it, I think of him when I'm playing it for my daughter. You know what I mean? And it just kind of brings you to that place. And people who have, like, Alzheimer's and those conditions, you play music and memories can evoke, and it can cause them to be stimulated by that. I guess depending on the age of the person listening, if you ever seen the movie Coco.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie Coco?
No.
In the movie Coco, Disney movie, I think it is, it talks about, like, the land of the dead or whatever. Theologically, like, just not, like, on the same page. But the old lady in the movie has a condition where she's basically, like, unresponsive to the people around her. She doesn't speak. She doesn't move. She's just kind of in the corner waiting to die. And then the kid comes in and he plays a song that her father used to play her. And then in the movie, obviously it's a cartoon movie, but in the cartoon movie, she goes from a state where she's just in the corner, just ready to die, to a state of where you see her eyes kind of coming up, and she starts singing the song. And after she sings the song, she recognizes everybody in the house. She's having dialogue with everyone. She's telling everyone stories. And it, like, revived her for that moment. Now, I realize that's a cartoon. But according to the research, music, if it evokes certain memories, can stimulate a very significant response in people with those kind of conditions. Particularly if you play a music, it says it actually can help prevent Alzheimer's disease if you know how to play a musical instrument. Now, just kind of focusing back on the research, some of the spiritual influence of music, rhythm and drum beats can place the listener. So in some of the some tribal rituals, can actually place the listener into an altered state of mind as brain frequencies capture sounds and react distinctively to the changes in tempo, pitch, and bass as it's delivered from the sensors into the ear. Now, if you ever worked out, if you've ever competed in any kind of sporting event, if you've wanted to just clean your house and get motivation for cleaning your house, you put on a song that's going to get you riled up, an 80s track or a rock song or crazy, rap track. Suddenly you have, like, an energy and you got this bounce, and then suddenly, if you're in the gym, you're hitting your chest, you're like, yeah, you're just hitting the weights. You need the music to motivate you or to get you in an altered state of mind so that you have the motivation to move
So
forward.
like, all music is different, but it has the capability of putting you in a different mood. So different types of music are not all equal in a sense. Like, not to say one is better than the other,
Sure.
but functionally, I don't see myself putting death metal on someone that's on the deathbed. You know what I mean? For whatever reason,
So it might wake them up. You know what I'm saying?
Wake them up with shock. No, who knows? I'm not
Sure.
knocking death metal for anybody that listens to that. But
Let's do it.
the reality is that different frequencies do play a certain role, kind of like you mentioned. Like, if you're in the gym, you're gonna play something that's very motivational. If you ever listen to some Spanish, like for me, like some salsa music or something, I don't really dance too good, but for whatever time I hear it, even if I don't want to dance, I find my foot kind of moving.
John's making moves.
He's just like,
Yeah, that I'm the best chair dancer. One of
yeah,
those
boy.
dancers that once they stand up, it's like combobulated and stuff. But the reality is, it's unconscious. I don't want to move. I don't want to do any of those things. But
Nor does your body really want
yeah,
to move.
no, yeah. but it's one of those things where the music has movement and energy. I remember seeing on, you can find this on YouTube, you can find this in different sources, but different frequencies actually have different power, like
Sure.
with meaning patterns.
Yeah.
So on YouTube, there's a video where they put granulated sand on a frequency board, and they hire the frequencies to different frequencies. And the amazing thing is that it has a pattern, right? And then it starts off with the lower frequencies. It starts off kind of being real simple, but everything is very perfect. It's almost like a snowflake in perfection. And then as the frequencies go up, the sand shifts automatically. He keeps.
Oh
they keep doing it.
yeah, I've seen that. You've seen that, right? I've seen that.
Yeah.
I think they have that even at the science centers.
Yeah, but what's crazy is that the higher the frequency goes, the more complexity the thing.
Yeah,
so
you see it just like
exactly. So it starts becoming way more complex,
Right.
depending on the frequency. So I heard from a particular person as a pastor, and he does a lot of studies on music. He showed that particular scene in, I guess, in YouTube to kind of show that not all music is kind of created equal. So kind of like you were saying, that the drum beats and things like that have the capability of putting a person in a trance, or it's kind of like geared that way. He says, and then he's real funny, the preacher, but he was basically saying that to evoke thought usually has the complexity of the music is more intense. So he was saying like classical music, and then he made a joke and was like, do you mean the type of music that smart people listen to? and if you think about it, it got me thinking. I'm like, that's wow. That, like, if you ever see somebody that's trying to really it's probably even proven, right, in some regards. I don't know the exact facts, but that when you play classical music and you're trying to study, your retention is probably somewhat better, you know, compared to other types of music. The only difference between that and, let's just take hip hop for another thing, different functions. But this preacher was saying that, you know, hip hop in the general the complexity is becoming less and less complex. So the reason I asked your daughter too earlier is that your daughter listens to really, like, if you notice, like, the type of shows that she watches is very, very, the beat is very, very, very easy to go along.
Yeah.
And you listen to a lot of music, modern music.
It's all repetition.
It's all similar things with just a beat over it. So rather than being like way more complex, going from the 60s and 70s to full-on bands, I mean, you
like
think
orchestras,
yeah,
just
you
like
think
hundreds of
you
instruments.
Think of, I'm not condoning any of these people that I'm going to mention. I'm mentioning them just to show that they
Right.
had a band, basically. Prince, the world loves this guy, but he had a band. You know, different, like, the reason I mention him in particular is that he was well known, and you wouldn't think that he actually is one of the best guitarists of all time. You know what I mean? But so they're trained musicians. But now you fast forward to modern times, you see the complexity kind of degrading. You know,
in some regard.
in some regards, of course, you're gonna have, but specifically, kind of like with hip hop. And
I mean, I think even in the hip hop circles, or even, you know, what is used for some of the platforms to make the beats, they are far more complex than just a simple drum. They're using drum frequencies 5, 10, 15 to just create a certain beat, to set a certain mood. And you know, when I'm picking a playlist for a party or to study, or if I need time to just think, or to whatever I'm trying, my attempt to accomplish, whatever I'm attempting to accomplish, my playlist will have a certain feel to it. And I don't do it based on artists. I do it based on feel. How does it sound? How does it make me feel? What mood does it set in the room? And it may set a different mood for me than it does for you. But the complexities of it, you know, I think there is some truth in what you're saying, because the instrumentation is less, but what actually goes into making the beats could be even more complex. You know, and I know from the kind of going back to the tribal thing, the drum beats in many tribal rituals are used to place people in hypnosis and to summon spirits and to put people in an altered state of mind in order to accomplish X, whatever that spiritual ritual is. And that's just the reality of what music is used for in different places. We talked about just now in a few minutes, music is used to calm down a child. Music is used to get a child to cooperate. Music is used to help us work out. Music is used to help us study. Music is used to help patients heal or for therapeutic reasons. Music is used to evoke memories and help people who have difficulty with memories or suffering from certain conditions be revived. Music can be used to hypnotize. Music can be used to insert subliminal messaging. You get people to focus on the beat and focus on the rhythm, and then you can just hit with subliminal messaging in the background. Music is used to put people in an altered state of mind for any number of reasons. And so just in a few moments, I think can all come to a consensus that these are the things that music is used for. Now, I think the question is, how does music influence the culture from a genre impacting culture standpoint, but also what is music? What can music ultimately be used for, in terms of worship and so forth?
I think of music in the form of like art, because music is art. It's like poetry with also rhythm and things like that. I heard a person say once, you can see the condition of a culture depending on the art. So if the art is grotesque, then what does that say about the culture?
Correct.
So if you examine, in my short life, I see, it seems like every decade there's a wave, right? But you see music evolve, and that's something that anyone can see.
Right.
You go from a disco era, you go from to disco era to maybe a grunge era to alternative to maybe a classic hip hop, and it doesn't take away from
the art
from like
the creative
all other arts
Sure.
that are still in function. Like there's light rock at all stages of these things. It doesn't take away from it. But what I'm talking about is the main focus of a generation kind of changes. So like there was a time where it was only grunge music, but that was the main number one hits were all grunge,
Yeah.
So
80s.
yeah, like late 80s, early 90s, but things evolve, and so like modern state is like I wouldn't even know honestly what if it would be mumble rap or it would be some type of thing. I don't know, but you can the reason I say all this is you can kind of see the type of things that you listen to is really a reflection of the condition of the culture.
Yeah, or the genre of music influences the culture. So we talk about styles of dressing, social orientation, so how people interact or how people speak. So if you think growing up as we did, in high school and so forth, you have like the skaters over here and those who were classified as skaters or rockers, right? They dressed a certain way, they wore certain brands of clothing, they wore certain brands of shoes, they grew their hair in a certain way, they spoke in a certain way, and they listened to a certain kind of music. And then you have, the hip hop kids, the same thing. We wore at that time baggy clothes, baggy shirts, as baggy as you can possibly imagine, shirts and pants. I don't know why we did that, but we did. And our slang terminology was very specific for the genre and the culture that was evolved around that genre of music. The way we spoke, our mannerisms were all influenced by the culture.
That's true.
But the culture was impacted by the music. And we see that across the board. We see that now as you get older, those lines and those those associations start to fade a little bit, because you can have a room full of people who are dressed, in corporate office attire, suit, tie, whatever it is that that looks like. And you ask, everyone's having lunch, everyone's talking, everyone's mingling, everyone's having a good time and relating to each other. But if you ask everyone at that table, what kind of music do you listen to? You're going to get very different responses, because when they're home, they do something different. But in front of you, those lines of like the dressing and the social and all that kind of goes away the older you get, because you mature a little bit to be able to socialize with people who are not exactly like you. However, music absolutely influences the culture in that way. And normally, your friends are related to those areas of your culture. The way you dress, the way you speak, the music you listen to impacts the people you hang out with. Now, before we started recording, John and I were sharing our playlist with each other. And my playlist is like diverse. I got Johnny Cash on there. I got, I've got some 80s joints. I've got, what you would deem worship music, right? I got hip hop, Andy Mineo, Lecrae. And then, you throw in there some breakdancing music, like pure 80s, no lyrics, just bounce, and
Sanford and Son
soundtrack. I've got the Last Samurai soundtrack on there.
That's dope though.
I just have a huge range, because at any moment the way I feel is going to influence what I listen to. And so I have a quote here by David Newman and my boy G. I think you remember David Newman. Brian Newman. So Brian Newman, he talked about music. He had that conference on music. He was like a musician, and he did a whole conference series, like 20-hour conference series on music. Everything from instruments, how it influences you, to how to compose music, to how to make music on a thing. Like, it just broke it down. And this is a quote from him. He says, "Our senses tap into our emotions." So he's talking about smell, taste, touch, sight, and sound. Smell, taste, touch, sight, sound. He says, "Our senses tap into our emotions, desires, memories, and decision-making. As people, we are influenced through these avenues. Our brain stores information we obtain from our senses for the rest of our lives. The more garbage we store, the more filthy we become." What is your interpretation of what he's...
It's to take into consideration that it's something that happened to me a while back. How I see that is basically, I remember when I was going through my rough patches. So I just became a Christian. So I was born again, and I had this falling out during this one time. So I started listening to a lot of political rap. Those of you who don't know, like Immortal Technique, that type of thing, like against the government. I started listening to like very
Fight the pig.
like heavy things like there's reptilians in the world and the conspiracy and all that. And like Mike can attest to this, I had that mindset start establishing. So that started shaping me, or what I thought. And I saw that all as me shifting, like I was shifting or pushing aside and putting in more and more stuff that was literally just garbage. It was things that would just reshape the way I was as a total, but it also shaped not only as I was, but who surrounded myself with. So I would stop focusing on hanging around talking to Mike, and I would just go and look for people that believed in what I believed in, like you guys were mentioning before. But in the sense, it was literally, I was adapting that whole outlook of how things were talked about or how they portrayed something. So I started picking that up, and that just started pouring out, and my life became more destructive.
It's, if you think about it, it's a platform to preach music. and that's what they're doing. If you think about some of the most popular music today, not all music, but some of the most popular music, the subject matters that are being addressed, even if they're talking about, let's say, you know, some of the issues in politics, right? Let's say that is the main subject. All of the pieces that are leading into that subject have this part of it. The acceptance of lust or pursuit of lust. You have the promotion of adultery, the love of money, the obsession with acquiring material possessions, the promotion of drug use, the acceptance and promotion of violence and racism, or any other worldview, right? So if you hold a particular worldview, using music to communicate that worldview, you know, same-sex relationships, or sensuality, or anything you want to push through that medium of music, that's what you're going to do. Rebelling against the government, rebelling against other authority like parents or the church, promotion of false religion. So you have, you know, so many ideas out there about God and about not being anti-God, like the Beatles and Rolling Stone and a lot of these popular groups that came up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that are continuing to be pushed heavy on the culture today, because the message they're communicating is to be anti-God, Jesus, really.
Or we are God mentality.
Right. Bringing the attention on self, 5% messages and so forth. There's demonic language and themes used in music. I know if you listen to some of the old school salsa and even like the Afro-Cuban jazz and all that, you listen to some of the names that they put on the instruments.
No, I know.
Those are santerismo, like big time.
Even lyrics,
right?
Like there was one, probably the most famous of salsa singers. He had, if I translated in English, he's like, basically, if you're not afraid to break a coconut, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. That, like, if I translate it verbatim from Spanish to English, but in reality, he's talking about, Santeria, where, I said that Matt White.
Santeria.
Santeria. No, but so there's a lot of, like, I think conscious, like, on the surface things. But if I had to, I don't know if you guys can, I'm gonna do something real quick.
Do it. Watch him, because I don't know what he's going to do.
to say a phrase, and I want to see if you're able to finish my statement.
I don't know, G.
All right, ready? Okay. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. How do you know that?
Because the repetition of the commercials.
No, but the reality is, like, exactly what I kind of want to talk about is nobody trained you to learn that. And there's probably a lot of viewers that are younger.
They're like, "What is Folgers?"
They don't even know. They don't even know because they grew up in a different era. And
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But the fact that you know that without you knowing that, so there's a level within in even marketing that that uses music. So the best part of waking up. How do you know that?
Sure.
It's a subconscious thing. So
it's like
there's
the McDonald's, like ba 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 ba.
Yeah,
I'm loving
you
it.
hear that automatically. You already know. You was like, man, I want a double cheeseburger.
And now
I
you-
don't.
now you're
I don't.
hungry.
By the way,
No, I don't. I don't either.
I'm good.
But that's the reality. So there's conscious things, like you were saying, that are there are blatant messages.
Sure.
And then there's also subconscious things. I wouldn't know what that salsa singer was talking about if I didn't do research of what a breaking a coconut means.
And the thing about that is, whether you're aware of it or not, it's still influencing you. It's still impacting your life. So even if you don't know that, so for example, perfect segue, right? So for example, I go to McDonald's. Don't eat McDonald's. But if I go to McDonald's and I eat a double cheeseburger, or I go to the window, I'm like, let me get a double cheeseburger.
regret it.
It's like, let me get a double cheeseburger, no cheese. You know what I'm saying? I'm on dairy free, no cheese. What you may not know is that the bun itself may have dairy byproducts that make up the bun. Hence, if you have a dairy allergy, you might still be influenced by the bun even though you didn't know it, you still consumed it. It still will affect your body. That doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you're ignorant to what you consume doesn't mean it's not going to impact you.
If anything, I would think it would be worse. So, like, if you listen to a type of music without hearing the lyrics, and then you're the type of individual that says, "Oh, that doesn't define me," or that doesn't, or if you choose, like, you're blatantly choosing ignorance to not know what the lyrics say, it doesn't mean those lyrics don't have power or into your subconscious. Kind of like what marketing would do. Like
100%.
I just want to create a jingle, ba 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 ba, and automatically every time you hear that,
it's ingrained.
It's ingrained, and your subconscious, if you are the type of person that wants to go to McDonald's, might be influenced into it.
Well, I went to school for marketing, and that was a big thing, was subliminal marketing. Like, anytime you have, and we talked about this in past episodes, what I'm saying? You have, like, your Coca-Cola or something kind of there in the scene. You may not desire Coca-Cola right then, but that subliminally is implanted in you, so maybe next week you're going to want a Coke. In the very same way, what you're saying, that's true. You consume it, it impacts you. And the ignorance piece doesn't necessarily save you from not knowing. So I remember preaching about the music topic years ago. And I did two things. One, I had played a track in the background in the beginning of the message. And you remember that? Yeah, I played like an instrumental track, and it was very low. And as I continued to preach, like the first few minutes, the track just got like louder, and the music got like more, just got like more powerful. And as I'm talking and I'm moving, everyone is like feeling the preaching more. Like you see them just like kind of getting out, and they're like, they're just doing like that, and they're like, yeah, yeah. And then me, as I'm talking, I just feel like I'm more powerful. But it has nothing to do with, it was just the music just kind of drove everyone to feel that way. Mm-hmm. And I did that as an example to say, look, everyone felt differently when the music was playing, and everyone started laughing. They were like, yo, it's true. So I did that, and it visibly showed how music can influence reaction. But the second thing I did was, because it was in a church setting, a lot of the misconception of the youth of that congregation was, well, I still listen to the songs that are of the culture, right? I listen to music of the culture, right? But at the time, it was trying to give a reality check to everyone, to say, just because you listen to the songs of the culture that doesn't have like curse words or something, doesn't mean that the lyrics might not be bad or wrong. Or so I gave an example, and I know this is a super old example. Only if you're my age, you really know who I'm talking about. But Ludacris, he has a lyric, and there's no curse words in it. And the lyric says, "Bang bang, kill a man, let his brains hang. And when I'm in the court, plead guilty in saying." So when I'm in the court, I'm gonna have to maintain. Oh no! So when I'm in the ward, so in the psych ward, I'm gonna have to maintain. So when I hit the streets, ain't nothing changed. Basically, he's giving you a playbook on how to get away with murder. Kill a man, let his brains hang. When you're in the court, plead guilty and saying. They're gonna put you in the ward for a little bit. Maintain. When you go in the street, ain't nothing changed. What in the world? And you ingest that, you eat that, and it just kind of ingrained in you. And as you're listening to these things, acceptance of lust, adultery, there is no God, do what you feel, that I am God, the world hates me, cut myself, no one loves me, and you start to listen to all this music, it's impacting you.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me because, we grew up in hip-hop, and I can attest to this. I started listening to hip-hop really young, maybe 10, 11, because before that I listened to, when you're younger, you're trying to find yourself. So I went through this rock phase. I don't know if you remember.
I remember all your phases,
I had like my hair like
I remember all his phases
for like 2 weeks, and then I was just like, no, this ain't for me. I can't hang with these people.
This man used to call me when he bought a new album. He's like, yo, you gotta listen to this, and it was like the worst lyrics ever. But we were like, yo, this is so dope.
Yeah. But the reason I mentioned that is there was a particular artist that I had an emotional attachment to only one song, and that person was able to speak to me later. So even to this day, I can quote lyrics even if I don't want to, it's in my mind. And so the reason I say that is there's a lot of people that might be thinking that music doesn't really have an effect on them, but one song, and it's always the innocent song. So for those that like rap music, you know that it might be different from different generation. But in my time, the album that they played on the song that they played on the radio was nothing like the individual when you bought the CD.
Nothing.
So it might be different because nowadays what you have is what you get.
It's the best song on the album.
It's the best,
right?
but at the time it was a little more censorship.
Right.
So the reason they would do that was to entice you with something that was sweet. Not sweet, but like a little bit more wholesome. So you'd be like, oh, it's not so bad. And then when you buy the CD, the message that the artist really wanted to portray in you. So the reason I say
That's
all
true.
of that is because there's a lot of people that might like one particular song, but that's only an opening door to that particular artist speaking to you years down the future. That person can put any type of messages in their song, and you will be a little bit more receptive because of that previous song that you had that emotional attachment with, you know?
That's true. And you know, in Psalm 135 verse 3 it says, praise the Lord, for the Lord is good, celebrate his lovely name with music. Music is designed to bring to remembrance, bring us in the mood, give us therapy for the purposes of worshiping God. To bring to remembrance his word, his promises, to put us in the mood, to get us refocused, draw our attention back to him, to stimulate the memories of, you know, through the lyrics of his goodness, to draw us to want to worship him. And in many verses throughout Scripture, it talks about instances where the believers were playing music, dancing and celebrating. David was someone who, you know, would do that openly, dance, played instruments in worship to God, just like all out praise. We love you, God. Thank you. That was a form of worship. That's not deemed the only form of worship, but that is a form of worship, right? And my fear is that in much of what we do on a day-to-day basis, whether we know it or not, the same example, eating McDonald's, eating whatever food, whether you know there's your dietary restriction is in the food or not, it's still going to impact you after you eat it, period. I feel like a lot of the activities that we do, whether it has to do with music or it has to do with any other form of entertainment or art, movies, places that we attend, whatever. My fear is that we're almost devoting those spaces and that mindset and our senses to worshiping something or someone other than the one true God. And I've seen people who were once, even people who led worship at churches, I can see when they are just so knee deep in other forms of worship outside of that, you can see, and I've seen people actually fall away from the church, not necessarily because the music impacted them, but their decision to now start to receive and ingest and enjoy other forms of worship led them away from the one true God. Does that make sense? Kind of what I was just saying.
Yeah. It kind of brings me to like a Bible verse that says, "Whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, continue think of those things." I asked you a question. I don't know if you remember. I think it was a couple weeks back, but I asked you, in the occult realm, do you remember? Like in the occult realm, is there music?
Yes, I remember. I was just gonna wait until you guys finish.
No, go. I was waiting for you, man. I was like,
because the occult, it's very different. I came from my dad. He would like playing. When I was a kid, I grew up. Even though my parents were strictly very into the church, my dad had like the best 80s collection or 70s collection. So he had like ABBA, he had like Queen, he had like all the classics that you consider classics. So I got raised in that sense. And when I would keep shifting, but I would see music, I wasn't stuck to one genre as a whole. When I got to I would say high school, I started getting more into hip hop. So, but by that time, I already was slowly getting into more or even deeper into the occult. So I started noticing some similarities of things that were being said. So the subliminal messaging that you guys were talking about, like I didn't see it just as simple words. I saw it as spells. So a person can say a sentence, and that sentence will linger within you, and it would keep being preached on during the whole.
So it's like the common theme of whatever the song is trying to portray.
So you have, say for example, Jay-Z, Lucifer, Light of the Morning, and we can go back to like the Illuminati days where it's like being researched.
Just even if you finish, don't lose your train of thought. But when you finish the lyrics, it says, "Lucifer, dawn of the morning, we're gonna kick you out of earth."
Yeah.
In the Bible, Lucifer didn't get kicked out of earth; he got kicked out of heaven. So in reality, it's kicking you out of earth to exalt you back in heaven. So that's pretty interesting.
It's crazy exaltation of the demonic.
But little
for sure.
things that are subliminal, you wouldn't even get
until you do your research, right?
But I would see them all as spells, and for me, it was like I don't remember exactly if it was Marilyn Manson or if it was Ozzy Osbourne who said, "We are gods." So when you chant and you have that euphoria, it's basically they're getting worship, but they're giving you a message so that they can ultimately get worshipped in the sense, but also they're feeding you what they believe. So I was encountering things where you have the Beatles, where no one knew who Aleister Crowley was at the time, but you have these religious people on their album covers. You have Aleister Crowley in a little corner, and he's basically just teaching them all the satanic and Luciferian like doctrine, and they're just feeding it to us in a nice little like wordplay. And yet the instrumentals will be all good. I had people tell me how, or even documentaries, I don't know if you saw that one with Bill Schnoblin, where he's talking about, or even John Todd, where he said that once they're done recording, without the artist sometimes knowing, they usually will get
the master.
The master, yes, correct. And then like witches, and they'll recite a spell over it.
Or
so
even the language was written in their language.
Correct, yes.
The song.
So there's basically a spell all over it. So you can, like you guys were saying, it's all subconscious. So even though you're not abiding to it, it's still affecting you. And
the purpose would be really is the agenda. We had a previous podcast. Check it out if you guys didn't catch it, but it was on the New World, right? It was on the what do you call it? The New Age.
New Age. Check out that episode of New Age and the Occult. Check out both of those episodes.
But New Age, and specifically, we talked about kind of like the main mission. So the reason they all have common themes, different artists. You could just plug in the different artists with the same common theme of doing whatever you want. It's because the main agenda was always that new age.
Correct. So just the same. I don't know if you guys saw Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah. I saw the new
Washington.
one. Yeah, not the old one.
I probably have, but I don't remember.
But it's a good example of a sleeper agent. So they'll usually bombard you with information so that you're not fully aware, but then they'll like put you to sleep, so that when they have a trigger word, trigger song, something like that, everything comes flooding back. So you're getting bombarded years down the line, your generations, everything. You're listening to this music. You think it's not like something big, but yet there's going to come this point in time where they're going to start putting in more songs or certain words or certain instrumentals, and then your brain is just going to be like, wait a minute, this reminds me of this, and then you're just going to fully engage or fully be adapted. So a good example is when you're watching a thriller or watching a horror movie, you're just watching it, but then all of a sudden, usually it's like dung, dung, and then you're just like, oh, someone's about to jump out. you already know someone's about to jump out, but they keep you in track. You're aware of what's going on, and then boom, it happens, and then all of a sudden this music starts happening, or like what you guys.
And
were
it puts
saying,
you in that certain mood, right?
correct,
Yeah,
it
right.
puts you in that mood, and that's just what's happening. It's been going on for years, since the days of like Egypt. This has been like consecutive. They used to say that, especially in their cult, that Lucifer was in the right hand or the right. He used to lead worship.
In
so
heaven,
he knows,
right?
So he knows what
In
influences
heaven?
people. Correct.
Yeah, just
In
make it
heavens.
clear, yeah.
So when he came down, that was like his main platform.
So
'Cause
this
he's-
is before the fall of Lucifer.
Correct.
In his position in heaven, right?
Correct. And he knows what influences people. So the best way to trigger it is the way he basically led worship, which was you direct it straight to me or direct it straight to the person, quote unquote, that is supposedly just feeding information.
And that is huge because music in many cases doesn't have language in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I could listen to an Italian opera and not think anything about the lyrics because the opera just sounds so amazing, the talent. Like I'm drawn to the skill of it. It's just amazing and I'm just in awe of it. Have no idea what they're saying, right? Don't know what they're feeding me until I do my research and I can come in accord, in accord with what's being said or rejected or whatever's happening. But even the motivation of why people make music,
Yes.
you don't know the motivation of people to make music unless it becomes apparent.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that had happened a lot within the past 10 years was the discovery of the things that G was saying. So like seeing the album covers of the Beatles album covers and seeing Aleister Crowley or seeing Aleister Crowley on Michael Jackson album covers or any other album cover, you start to see that they're telling you this is who influenced us. This is the reason why we made music. When you hear the lyrics, you hear people, you hear them throwing at you what and the reason and why and what they're doing. And it's no wonder why in our last episode we talked about why is there less attendance in church and what's happening with the response of the culture to the church and all that. It's no wonder why people are not a part of a church community because the worship that we're giving to are to other gods. And when it's time to devote time to worship the one true God, it's difficult. You're bombarded by all other forms of worship to all other gods, and it's very easy to get into that place. But when you have to get into the place where I need to worship the one true God, dedicate time to speak to him, to love on him, it's difficult. I just can't find the motivation. I can't find the reason. It's not in me.
I'll give you guys just a quick example. Before I became a Christian, and before I say this, this is my personal experience. So this is true to really what happened to me, okay? Before anybody says whatever I'm going to say as fantastical or coincidence or whatever. But when I was younger, in high school, I used to listen to nothing but hip-hop music. And I remember my mother buying me the CD player, and the CD player was fine. But it came to a point where I was kind of wrestling. God was already tugging in my heart to kind of serve him. I didn't know how or what that meant. I didn't know about any churches to go to. My family only attended church on New Year's,
like holiday,
New Year's and on vacation when we traveled to Chicago. But other than that, at that time, so I had a relationship with God, knowing me looking back now, me talking to God in prayer, but still not knowing what that meant. And I would listen to, I remember at the time they had, I don't know if you remember this. This is how old. At the time, there was a thing where you could get multiple CDs by publisher, clearinghouse, not clearinghouse, one of these publisher, for music. You basically, the CDs that you would want, you could get 11 for the price of one. So my sister and me and I were like, she was like, oh, what? Of course, this is my older sister. So she was like, I'm going to get 9 CDs and you're going to get 2. So whatever 2 CDs you want, think, you know. So she got the 9, I got the 2. But I remember watching, this is how influenced I was. Like, I remember just flipping the channels and there was this Christian rock band at the time, DC Talk.
Shout out to DC
For those
Talk.
that know who that is.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, like that song's pretty good. So let me buy that album. But then I forgot what other album I bought, but let me get another secular album, which was what I wanted.
To balance my life.
Yeah. I was like, okay, God, I'll get that because it sounded really, really good. So I played it when I would be in my room after I got the CDs, brand new. It would play, but at times it wouldn't play. So it got to a point where it progressively got worse. So the CD would only play Tupac. What do you call it? Terror Squad. All those bad CDs, but 100% of the time. So it got to a point where I already knew is that the CD, like every time I would play that Christian album, the CD player wouldn't work. It would just say error. It would just spin and spin. And I looked at it. I was like, there's no scratches. It would play in different sources and stuff. But when it would be in my room in the CD player,
like,
it wouldn't work. So, for those that will listen to this and say, oh, wow, that's coincidence. But there was a lot of spiritual things going on in my life at that time. Different things of me, demons covering my mouth in the middle of the night. So to me, it was a spiritual thing. So for whatever reason, it didn't want me to listen to a certain type of music because it wanted to keep me in bondage. But God in His sovereignty already knew it didn't matter what the enemy tried to do to me. Eventually, I was going to serve God. I mean, Jesus. So there's a lot of people out there that might not think that it affects them, but those subliminal messages are in there regardless.
Yeah. To add to that, there's something I like telling people, which is when you start looking at music as just simply entertainment, then it's not entertainment, it's entertaining, meaning it's literally just it's controlling you, so to speak. So
what is it? Enter to detain, right?
Entertaining, like you're entering, being controlled.
But to detain somebody is to what? To arrest.
Right?
Right?
I wasn't saying detain.
No, I know. Yeah. But to detain you is to arrest you. To enter you is to enter you. So to arrest, if you think about even the entertainment, the word entertainment is to detain, to enter.
Right.
So it's pretty interesting. Go, sorry.
But yeah, so I mean, music as a whole, it's just, I've always seen it with forces behind it, never just simple things. So I encountered this a lot, especially we all had that phase when we just become born again, where we have that whole pack of CDs, or like it's on your iPod. Like for me, it was just like CDs and iPod. So, but I had an iTouch. This is when iTouch first came out. So I remember just like coming out of church and just like delete, or like CDs,
I remember
like rip, because you just listen to one song. Like
you
for me,
knew.
for example, it was Bone Thugs and Harmony. And I listened to one song and I was just like, nah, boom, like just rip the CD. And like I deleted everything. And then yet you see people within the church, like years later on, I see that still, which is people that just become born again. They have this honeymoon phase. And then after a while, they start dulling down. And then they're like, they'll go to like a band camp or something like that. And they're like artists that are like Tupac or something, and then they'll see like, oh, Andy Mineo, and then they'll listen. There's like something still different. I like him, but something's still left out. But I've always seen it entertaining because the music of the world, or what we deem as like worldly music, it feeds the flesh. So that road is broad, while you have the narrow road, which is worshiping to God. Like everything is derived to worship God, and it's something we stripped away worshiping ourselves or worshiping something else, that now we're left to like, oh, it's only God. But yet when you start jumbling into I like bumping this, or I want this to be sounding a certain way. Why isn't that not like that? We start going back slowly, and then that starts influencing us back to that way.
You know what's funny? My wife and I had a conversation, and I have a couple more points to later on in a bit. But my wife and I were having a discussion about that, where I remember throwing away all my, like, I had that moment where it was just like I realized and I understood that the music that I was listening to was giving worship and devotion to something other than God. And so I was like, I'm done. So I was driving down, I'm not going to name the street, but I was driving down a street where it's like one lane going, one lane coming.
I know the street.
And John knows the street. and, you know, there's a bunch of trees and stuff. And I literally just put down my window. Like, I rolled down my window like this. And I was just chucking CD after CD after CD out the window. And I would, like, as I'm driving, I don't advise this, right? But I'm looking at the CD. I'm like, yep, chuck, boom. And I just threw out all my CDs. And I remember telling you about, I was like, I threw them all out. I said, no, I understand where the devotion's going to. But little by little, you start to get comfortable to where now, you know what I'm saying, even my music collection now, you would be like, really? You got Earth, Wind, and Fire up in that piece? Have you seen the album cover of Earth, Wind, and Fire? Do you see all the Egyptian influence in that music and so forth? And it's almost like, I think in some respect, you either mature enough to understand it and you're able to discern, have a discernment about it. And in another sense, there's some music that can be seen as pure art. And
that's what I was about to say.
And you know, and I think regardless of the motivation of the individual, right? Because there's clothing items that we wear that the motivation of the individual was not of God. Like a lot of the things
like
that we
the
have.
Intent
the intent, the haircuts that we have, some of the devices that we have, Apple, you know what I'm saying? Like this is clearly the Apple, bitten Apple, expand your mind. You look at the marketing from early on in Apple's campaign, it was about being in line with anti-Christianity. That's what it was. But I use Apple devices because it works amazing, and in spite of the intent, I'm going to use it to glorify God, right? So I can make spin on it, right? But my wife and I were talking about it because we were like, man, when I was younger and I was single, listening to like Boys to Men or some kind of R&B was dangerous, right? Because I'm thinking of sexual thoughts and I'm thinking about, and I'm arousing all this interest in my heart and my, genuine,
Men.
ride that pony, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like it's all bad, from that context. But now that I'm married, in a marital setting, if I want to listen to some R&B to ignite some sexual situation, it should be okay because it's under the banner of marriage, right? So I think there's a certain sense of maturity and discernment for some of those pieces, but is not to ignore the fact that everything that we're talking about, where when you have subliminal messaging, when you're not, when you intentionally ignore what some of the messages are, you put yourself in a very dangerous situation, to get influence on that. So
it kind of like in the occult, the reason I was asking you earlier about that was that, like, if someone's trying to not just secular music or music that's popular, right, of the world, right, but like if somebody wanted to use in the occult music in a spiritual sense, is there any words, or would it just be a certain frequency to take you to an alternated state?
I mean, it's both. Mostly now, it's a lot of chanting. So we see that a lot in hip hop, where you can have. You've seen this. Some people make fun of it, but I think Mike, I showed you the video where you have like a old school Rihanna song, where it's like you could just see it as a normal, like, oh, it's a chorus, it's Ella 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 A, but yet you go translate it to Hebrew, it's like no God,
or like
no
the
God,
Lady
no
Gaga
God.
song with the ra, whatever,
You think it's nothing. But the thing is, it's certain key words, and that's why I've said you don't look just specifically at the message. Yes, you can get mature enough to say that's art. Like, I strongly believe that. Like, you'll have artists, they'll come up to them and, like, for example, Andy Mineo, he had an interview where they asked him, do you listen? He's like, yeah, I listen for creative purposes, like to see what's going on in the culture. But necessarily, it doesn't mean you believe strongly what's going on in that.
But if you're repeating that chant, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so like what I'm really trying to say is that like in the occult, they usually it's like they use music to really take them to an alternate state. The verse that you were talking about, it's basically singing hymns always. And the Bible verse that I said previously was, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, think of those things. And the Bible, it also talks about like just continually let it be on your tongue, always just talking. So the power in the Christian realm, the power is in the lyrics. The power is in not chanting, not vain repetitions, as the Bible puts it. Do not be like the heathens who do vain repetitions. In the occult side, it's the polar opposite.
Yes.
It's the vain repetitions. It's the alternated state of whatever frequency they're trying to get to. You know what I mean? So you can see the clear-cut difference of even on a spiritual level, the power in the words. And so for a person that's listening to this podcast that says, oh, I don't really listen to the words, I just listen to the beat, that's a very dangerous situation, because that the power is in the words.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. My wife, to go back to kind of like that influence that you're not certain of, my wife the other day, she was telling me, she's like, I have to admit something. So I was like, what happened? She's like, I watched this horror or this it wasn't like horror movie, it was like a demonic movie. Yeah, no, it was like pure demonic movie. And she's like,
type,
something like that. Yeah. So she was like, I saw it, I got tempted by it. I love that, I used to love that type of movies. And so she's like, I just I watched it. And she didn't tell me until a few days later. But she told me she watched it. And that night, I didn't know she watched it. I went to sleep early that day. Went upstairs, went to bed. I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning that night. Couldn't sleep the whole night. And I woke up completely. I was completely awake. Completely awake.
From 0 to 100?
Yeah. 0 to 100, completely awake, 2 o'clock in the morning. My eyes were wide open. I was up, as you can imagine. And I look up at the ceiling. I was like upset because I was up. I was like, I got to work in the morning. I was like complaining in my head. And I look up at the ceiling and I see an image of, and this is, again, kind of going back to what John said. Like, I'm not one of those dudes that talks like this, what word did you use?
Fantastical.
Yeah, like I don't use this
hypogetical.
Yeah, hypogetical, illusional. I don't use that. But what I experienced was real, and I looked up and I just saw the image was like a character, almost like a cartoon character, in the ceiling. The ceiling was open, and it was a portal, and this little character thing was like holding an umbrella, hanging in the balance in the ceiling between the portal universe, whatever that was, it was going to, and my house.
Like Mary Poppins.
And yeah, it was like, but it was like a little character, a little cartoon character, just floating in between. And then there was this other character next to it that was just kind of like pulling at it this way. And it was just, that's all I saw. Literally. And it was as bright as almost this room. That little image. And I was like, am I asleep? I looked at my wife. She's there.
You slapping yourself?
No, I was up. So I grabbed my phone. I touched my phone, looked at my phone. Boom. I was like, yeah, it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I looked back up. The image is still there. I didn't freak or nothing. I was just like, man, now I'm awake. I didn't even think anything of it. So I told my wife. She didn't say anything. Next day, I believe it was the next day, she was like, hey, I got to admit something. I watched this movie during that day. And when I turned on the movie, I had this conviction over putting it on, and it was very demonic. It wasn't just like,
regular.
It wasn't just like scary and running away and somebody crawling through your TV. She was like, no, it was chance.
Like Chucky or what?
It was yeah. She was like, it was like reading of demonic books and all this stuff. Like it was actual like demon stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things I had mentioned in a previous podcast was the reason why I had stopped watching those movies is because the logic is when you look at movies, like, to make it real, you have to study it. You have to become it. So, like, for Will Smith to do Ali, the role of Ali, effectively, he had to, like, become Ali.
For like a method actor.
He had to study his movements. He had to like speak with him. He had to watch his tapes. He had to repeat the way he talked. He had to his mannerisms, his body. He had to transform who he was to become Ali, to evoke that on the screen. What difference is it when you're trying to evoke demonic realm to the viewer, if not but become it? It's the same thing. It's going to take the same methods, right? And so that's the reason why I did, right? So she mentioned it, boom, image, I see all that stuff. Long story short, the reason why I bring that up here is because the things that you are not aware of doesn't mean it doesn't impact you.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case of what I'm talking about, I wasn't even the one that watched the joint, and I was the one who was impacted by it. Fast forward, I didn't sleep that night, had like a terrible day the next day, and my wife tells me that's what happened. It's just, is it coincidental? No. Super interesting that it happened. Definitely prayed about it. Said we're protected. But that spiritual encounter was real. And even if you are the person who's not influenced by what you're listening to or what you're watching, the people around you are certainly going to be experienced or are going to be impacted. And it's very important that you're aware of that even if you want to play ignorance, it's going to impact you or the people around you more than you know. And in the culture that we live in today, that's all about me, you forget about the people who are around you and how much it's going to impact them.
On the other side of that spectrum, positive, uplifting music that glorifies and worships
Yes.
God
Yep.
continually will put you at a state where you'll continually the opposite. So instead of fear, instead of all these emotions, it puts you in a place where continual.
Well, because
so
you're
it's the opposite.
continuing to renew your mind,
Yeah.
being reminded of, setting the atmosphere to present back to God, and you know, just kind of to almost come to a conclusion. Even when we talked about the rhythm and so forth, you know, I would dare to say there are congregations that when we talk about like that moment or that time of worship, sometimes that, you know, the beats and the rhythms get you in a place where you think you're worshiping God because you're like pumped about something. It's like, Jesus, right? But you listen to the lyrics in some of even what we deem Christian music. Some of those lyrics are very self-centered, very much about me instead of about him. More uplifting of me and more petitions about what my needs are than glorifying and reflecting on who he is. That is the biggest blessing we can have.
Which is something also that some artists like to argue about, saying that he's given me this gift, but I'm using it to like encourage others, but yet they don't direct it to say, for example, to him. So it's all about just focusing on me making my career because he gave it to me and I'm using what God gave me. So I'll just throw in one song about God, and then the rest would just be like to.
I mean, I think I'm a byproduct, like that story I told about DC Talk. I didn't know who they were, but it sounded so good. It sounded almost like stuff that I would hear on the radio, and that was the thing that kind of drew me. So like, there's a lot of people out there that might be affected. So I can't say it's good or bad, but I was a testament.
It's tough, you know. It's like this fine line because I think my belief is, you know, if God has given me the talent, I don't necessarily have to put in my lyrics. You know, John 4:12 says that I don't have to do that for it to be worship to God. Like it can be the nature and the manner in which I do it is worship to God. But you know, I think when you just have to be mindful of every circle that we are, that we are influenced at every turn. And it almost sounds like when we do these podcasts, you almost have to walk around with your hands up, right? Mad guarded. But you kind of do.
Yep.
We kind of need to always be guarded because we're at war. This is not a place where, you know, this is rest time and it's enjoyment time. There is spiritual warfare every day for our attention, for our affection, to draw us away from worshiping and glorifying God, and to worshiping and glorifying ourselves, the world, and Satan.
Well, the things that you were mentioning is also in the Bible, right? Do not have like pride of life, different things like that.
Right. For all that is in the world is the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life. And
Which
it's
are
not of the
basically
world.
what you were mentioning.
Right. It is not of the Father, but of this world. And the world is passing away and the lust of it. But those who trust in the Lord obey him, right? They're obedient to him. They seek after him. And that's who we need to be. People who seek after God, who love God, who are mindful. And we're at war. And when we're not diligent and we become sluggish, it's apparent in our prayer life. It's apparent in our ability to even attend to congregate with other believers. It becomes difficult to like lift your hands and say, God, thank you for this day. I praise you. I love you. To initiate a conversation with a non-believer to say, hey, evangelize. Like, it becomes very difficult because of the things that we have devoted our time to. And we've divided ourselves to not glorify God, but to glorify ourselves, the world, and to glorify Satan himself. So we put ourselves in a very peculiar position when we do that, and it's dangerous. And we're at war. We're at war.
And sometimes we think of ourselves too mature. So, like, back to what we were saying, like, mature in the sense that, I know where I stand, so I could still listen to this. Or
God knows me. Or my favorite is only God could judge me. But the reality is you don't want God judging you. Like, you want people judge me.
You want people to let me know and point me in the right direction.
That's a very popular thing. I used to say it before I even understood what that was. Tupac had a song, Only God Could Judge Me, So
and I may know all the lyrics.
Yeah, I actually do. No, but the reality is, like, people can use that phrase, only God could judge me, but that's not something you really kind of want,
Yeah. So we've gone over time. This topic is definitely a deep one. Thank you to the person who requested this episode. We appreciate you very much for requesting the episode. We won't say your name unless you want it to be shouted out. So we're not going to shout you out just for, I guess, confidentiality purposes. But if we would love to definitely shout you out if you wanted us to. Thank you so much for requesting. Thank you for listening. You can find us on a ton of platforms. We're on.
Well, I mean, first off, you can email us at proofbeyondreason@gmail.com if you want us to actually talk about a topic.
And that's how the request came in, not through proofbeyondreason@gmail.com, but someone messaged us on Facebook.
Because we're also on Facebook.
We're also on Facebook. So hit us up on Facebook if you want to hear a particular topic. We're more than happy to entertain it.
If you want to see our beautiful faces, you can see us on YouTube as well.
YouTube.
On YouTube.
Instagram. You see us on Facebook and iTunes, SoundCloud, so forth. So thank you so much for listening. Yeah. Definitely, I think, in conclusion, to kind of wrap things up, guard your heart. Realize that there are things out there that want your attention. They want your affection. They want to draw you away from worshiping God. And even to the degree that, as you're even listening to music that would be deemed Christian music, just to guard your heart would be to filter out some of the music, listen to the lyrics, and make sure that it is in fact glorifying God, because we're talking about your spirit, we're talking about your soul, we're talking about who you are in Christ. And so make that something of highest priority, because it's very important for your spiritual health. So we love you guys, and thank you so much, and we'll catch you around. This is Mike the Baptist.
J-Mo.
Geology.
See ya.